Coming to you live from the CII headquarters. I have two very special guests with me today. The President-elect, Uday Kotak, as well as the Director General, Chandrajit Banerjee. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here on ET Now. Confederation for Indian Industry has managed to get some of the first public appearances of cabinet ministers of Modi 2.0, who've been setting out the agenda for the next 100 days in the run-up to budget on 5th of July. But this time round, when corporates are going and saying this is what needs to be done with the economy, these are the changes that we need, fiscal consolidation, but you need to pump prime growth, we need tax cuts, all of that, it's happening at a time when corporate governance has really taken a serious beating. It's really the flavor of the season. Mr. Kotak, I'm going to begin with you. This is a movement you have spearheaded. You've headed a committee on fixing corporate governance, strengthening it. A lot of those recommendations, for whatever reasons, still need to be made a reality. But this really has been a low point for India Inc. Are you seeing any change in the mindset of India Inc. and is the government really coming down harshly?
I think one of the first and important agendas at CII is to build trust between government and industry. And on this platform, one of the key issues which CII is committed to is to build confidence in the corporate governance framework of corporate India. There have been challenges. We are seeing many issues come up, but some of the issues which have come up have actually come out of the recommendations of the SEBI Corporate Governance Committee, which I had the privilege of being a member of. And the latest one, if you look at in the context of auditors have to give the reasons for why they are stepping down. So that is something which is playing out in the public domain. So there are a number of recommendations which our committee has made. There is a code of conduct which CII has put out, which is committed to building a platform for cutting-edge governance of corporate India.
But we've not seen perhaps the pace that should have been kept at adopting a lot of those recommendations of them becoming a reality. For example, just look at the auditor one that you talked about. Auditors think it's okay to resign and they don't explain why. Does that absolve them of everything? Just yesterday, for example, you saw, in the case of one of the big four resigning from two companies, it has become a big trend and it's still not changing.
Now, one of our recommendations is that when an auditor resigns, he needs to explain the reasons why he is resigning. And I think that is being something which has been adopted. And I do believe auditors have to follow that.
Okay, so you feel that it's going to come up in the 100-day agenda?
No, it's already a part of the SEBI guidelines.
Okay, so no more work needs to be done on that?
On that, the guidelines as they stand is if any auditor resigns prematurely, they have to give the reasons
why. Which is what perhaps you saw in the case of maybe PwC, Reliance Homes and Reliance Cap, but you didn't see maybe with Manpasan or Verkange. I don't expect you to comment on this.
I don't want to comment on specific cases. As CII, we talk about industry issues, not company specific.
I totally take that point. But Mr. Kotak, I also have to ask you before we move on, this new fear that is existing, and it has to exist for industry too. The big four have the majority of the business when it comes to audits. If you're going to remove two of them, which is Deloitte as well as BSR, which is the KPMG affiliate, it is going to lead to disruption. But do you think this is what is really needed for India for once and for all to give a strong message?
No, I am very clear that as we go forward, India needs to do significant capacity building in its economic and financial sector. And therefore, whether it is the dominance of the global audit firms or global rating agencies or global credit information bureaus or areas like, say, even the significant levels of ownership, of global ownership in many sectors, if we want to build sustainable growth and believe in the primacy of the nation state, time has come for us to really have significant capacity building in some of these key functions, including areas like audit and credit rating.
So it's okay if we see this happen, it has to happen maybe for India to increase its capacity, because we don't even have 25 firms which have 20 partners.
I'm not commenting on global firms or local firms. I'm saying domestic Indian capability and capacity. to manage world-class quality in many areas of governance, economics, and finance.
And is this a big problem right now when we talk about attracting growth capital? Liquidity has turned out to be a problem. The NBFC space, we're still seeing it recover. We need many reforms in the financial sector. Is this the biggest pain point in the economy?
As I look at the whole discussions on the financial sector and particularly the NBFC sector in that context, I believe there are two important aspects which we need to look at. First is within the financial sector, there are many verticals. Time has come for us to have a holistic view of the financial sector, and therefore the strengthening of the FSDC mechanism which is in place, so which gets significantly more active under the leadership of the finance minister with the different regulators, so that we take a one view of the financial sector is extremely crucial. And the second point specifically on NBFCs is we have to divide the issues into three categories. Number one, issues of solvency. Number two, issues of governance. And number three is issues of liquidity. At times, I believe there may be an attempt to obfuscate the issue of governance and solvency as a liquidity problem. We got to look at clearly these three areas distinctly.
But there are overlaps.
There are, of course, overlaps. But if there is a solvency issue, you cannot solve it by a liquidity answer.
Okay. Is that a mistake that the regulators and the
I'm
government?
not saying that that is a mistake by the regulators and the government. Very often, the lobby groups try and obfuscate these issues.
So has CII got it right?
CII has got it right. I'm talking about lobby groups, and we don't think about CII as just in any sense in that manner.
No, I'm not a lobby, but you do make representations to the government. You do interact with them. So there are certain overlaps. What is the CII's recommendation for fixing this entire problem? Because this is being seen as one of the biggest pain points for the economy.
You know, one of the things that we have been really doing is, as Uday was talking about this, how can we be more self-governed and self-regulated. Going way back in 1998, we first came out with the Code of Corporate Governance for the private sector, and thereafter there has been many points in time, as you know, where we have made changes. But today, what's happened is we have redefined the Code of Corporate Governance and going sector-wise. Say, for instance, there are major sectors where we have code of conduct for the corporate community, say for instance for the real estate sector, for the healthcare sector. So we are slowly moving towards different sectors in which these are voluntary codes of compliance, which are being framed by the sector themselves within CII, and we are going to place more and more of this.
But they're not following it. Even if you look at real estate, you know, delivery is still a problem. The trust is not back, which is why the real estate market is not picking up.
So, number one, when we talk about creating this trust, there has to be some examples, as well as there has to be a framework which we will say this is what we are going to follow. Many companies are actually signing up these codes to say yes, this is what we are going to follow. Many companies in our general code of conduct, which CII has brought up, has said that, well, we could have signed your code, but we have gone even beyond what's written in your framework.
Chandrajit Banerjee, you also have auditors that are part of CII.
Yes, of course.
It is a big problem. Is it time now to police the auditors?
It's not the time now to police the auditors, but it's a time now for us to definitely have broad guidelines like what we just talked about. And I think that's going to be very critical for us to see that A, we are able to do justice both sides. You know, therefore, of course, there is an issue of capacity, but the issue of capacity should not be mixed up with if there is anything which is wrong or there is a shortfall in governance. And I think that's where I think a very strong framework should come up and not really be judged on a very arbitrary basis at times. So what is going to be that framework and how we are going to work? Yes, they are our members. Auditor firms are also a part of the institution. So we will have to see to it. It's not just because they're a part of our institution that we'll have to protect or not protect, but it's the right framework that should come up for the corporate community, which is much more important, and from the point of view of governance.
Mr. Kotak, how do you see this entire situation panning out? This is also coming at a time, and I'm sure industry is also fearful of everybody being painted with the same brush. Industry also, where are they going to find the auditors? It is the biggest talking point today in the economy.
Nayantara, when you look at the whole area of governance, particularly in the context of the financial sector, there are 6 checks and balances. Number 1, management. Number 2, board of directors. Number 3, institutional shareholders. Number 4, auditors. Number 5, rating agencies. And number 6, regulators. So these are the 6 fiduciaries which do their job and have checks and balances. We need to look at the roles of different fiduciaries in specific contexts. And each case may have to be analyzed along the lines of these 6 players and their respective roles.
So when the government, for example, comes up with a proposal and says that should independent directors sit for an exam, how realistic is this? Is it going to even help at all? Or would it be better to say let independent directors appoint special advisors, independent advisors at the cost of the company?
I would say that my personal view is that companies should be proactive to ensure that all directors on their boards are given enough opportunity to be at the cutting edge of what is required in their fiduciary role. And maybe the top 50 or 100 companies should set an example themselves.
Well, the problem also is the independent directors are usually family members, someone's in-law, sister-in-law, brother-in-law's neighbor, related parties, so to speak.
Not
always, but that is the case, right?
Right.
In the promoter-driven companies.
And investors are smart, stakeholders are smart, they see through all this. And if it's a listed company, the marketplace will speak. And in many ways, shareholders will vote on their feet.
I want to just ask you a quick question on liability. When it comes to corporate governance, the liability that exists on nominee directors and independent directors. You have a situation now where private equity and venture capital firms feel scared having nominee directors because they feel there's just far too much liability and they don't have that much say. On the other hand, there are people who believe that you need to increase the liability. How do we find this balance?
In fact, in our corporate governance report, we have recommended that companies do directors and officers liability insurance. And therefore, I do believe many of the cutting edge listed companies already have a D&O liability insurance, and then we can debate what the amounts are, but that's the way to go. I mean, if there's a fiduciary responsibility, there should be some sort of an insurance on that, but you cannot as a fiduciary absolve yourself of your normal diligence as a director.
Mr. Banerjee, you said that if you're not going to protect members just because they're part of the CII, if there's been wrongdoing, there's been wrongdoing. We have been talking, for example, to the Big Four as well. Obviously, they are of the view that this is too far drastic a step. They've been carrying out forensic audits. How can it be that time and again audits have been taking place? This is a case of business failure. There is also this fear. How do you differentiate between business failure and collusion?
Of course, yeah.
What is the best way of doing this?
I think, again, the best way of doing that is really having a very clear framework to decide. And we should be, there's another issue as to when you really talk about the top 4 and there are also mistakes by an auditor vis-a-vis or of a partner vis-a-vis the firm. I think we also need to understand that very clearly. And also wherein there is, if there is any case of collusion which we come up with, we have very clearly said that law has to act. I mean, you have to have a very strong.
No one's above the law.
No one is above the law, and I think, and for that, whether we have capacity or not capacity, whether
is irrelevant.
Absolutely irrelevant. So, but very clearly, we should understand. What is I think that's the judgment that we need to take, and that's the clarity that we really need to bring about as to whether is it happening through collusion, is it, and there is no escaping that in case there is, and I think that's where strong judgment is extremely required in the country, and as we see more and more such cases coming into the fore.
Yeah. But should not. But they will obviously want to say, Mr. Kotak, this is maybe a witch hunt. This is just a case of wanting to make an example to send out a strong message and create disruption in the market.
No.
I think the fact of the matter is each case has to be looked at specifically, and proper analysis and investigation needs to be done, and the basis of that should be the basis. I am always a believer that facts and data should be the basis of any steps taken. And as long as you do that and you have facts and data backing you, I think that's the correct way of going forward. And overall, I think as a system, we do need to keep in mind that the marketplace is important. You have a whole host of minority stakeholders, whether in debt or equity, who depend on fiduciaries for the basis of their investments.
Yeah.
And we cannot let them down.
Right. Because, what has happened now with corporate governance, Mr. Kotak, is not just about the image or future investments. It started because of bad corporate governance, which is now hurting the economy. It's only after the INFS scam happened and you saw whatever happened with DHFL, India Bulls, that has now gone down all the way to, for example, auto sales. It's hurt the liquidity market. It's hurting the housing market. It's hurting the retail investors. It's hurting the debt mutual funds. It's had a kind of a cascading impact which we perhaps have not seen in India. So what I want to also understand is, where do you think this whole situation is with respect to the economy? Are you seeing any form of revival? Is it even possible till this is fixed?
Narendra, I see very interestingly two phases of this development. There was, for a long time, the real sector was impacting the financial sector.
Yeah.
We now may be seeing signs of issues in the financial sector beginning to impact the real
vice
sector.
versa situation. Yeah.
So, if you talked about from the period post 2011, the real sector and the stress which happened in the real sector impacted the financial sector.
All right, that was the most relevant, the most important voice that matters at this hour. Uday Kotak speaking exclusively to ET Now about a whole host of issues. He's talking about NBFCs. He's talking about the need to divide NBFC issue into three categories, dividing it into solvency issue, governance issue, liquidity issue. He's also offered his commentary about the whole host of issues happening about corporate governance. He's also given his statement, his views about what he expects from the budget. He said there's a need to strengthen FSDC under the leadership of the FM. So a lot of issues being touched upon by none other than Uday Kotak, only on your channel.